page 411. Understand, human beings of Earth, that the quote, teaching of the prophets, the quote, Goblet of the Truth, the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, is no ideology and no philosophy. Neither is it a religious construction of confusing terms and irrational ideas. Therefore, however, the teaching does not require a belief, nor any praying and entreaties to gods and tin gods, or to human beings who raise themselves up to tin gods. Ideologies, philosophies, and religions are belief-conditioned theories which, as exceedingly foolish guidances into the unreal, have nothing to do with the effective truth and with the effects of the creational laws and recommendations. What is important in your life is, without doubt, not false religions, ideologies, and philosophies, but rather that you consciously observe and perceive everything round and about you, and indeed everything that arises day in and day out, and actually in yourselves, everything negative and positive, everything agreeable and disagreeable, as well as everything that happens to your fellow human beings and throughout the entire world. And if you follow this guidance, and you observe everything precisely, and actually perceive everything, and examine what goes on within you and outside you, then you can also understand it rationally and intellectually. Rationality and intellect, however, do not fully encompass everything that your existence presents to you. Rather, they are only small parts of the whole, and you must put these together in order to finally have a oneness, a whole. All things, therefore, which you comprehend are only small parts of the life, and indeed irrespective of how discerningly, venerably, and traditionally these things of the life may be put together as individual values or unvalues. It is you yourselves, however, who must put everything together into a whole, because it is only through this that you can reach the highest level of your understanding and your evolution, if you concern yourselves with the whole. It is only when you recognize what is going on in yourselves, as well as in your fellow human beings, and in the entire world in detail, that you can start to understand that the inner and outer process is fundamentally an equal one. The inner and outer process of development represents an all-embracing movement, where the movement of your inner is reflected in the outer, and the outer is reflected in your inner. And truly, you human beings of Earth, you only need to consciously make yourselves capable of looking at everything just as amply and consciously, and perceiving it just as consciously, because that and how you look is the fundamental necessity to which you must give your attention. Consider, if you know how you have to look at the things of the life and perceive them, then everything will become entirely clear and precise for you, and you will recognize that all that is required in order to look at and to perceive is merely your own motivation and merely your own will as well as your own initiative. However, no ideology, no religion, no philosophy, as well as no teacher, priest, no gods and tin gods, and of course, no human idols, and neither false nor true prophets, because you alone, through yourselves, can determine over yourselves and over what you want to do or not do. Truly, no one can say to you how you need to look and to perceive. Therefore the true prophets do not say to you either how you shall look and perceive, but only that you shall look and perceive, because you are, as an individuum, as a human being, each of your own individuality, through which you alone can determine how, when, and where you want to look at something, and also how you want to perceive it. And if you strive to look at and perceive all things as they are in reality, and indeed both in yourselves and also in the world around you, amongst your fellow human beings, and throughout the entire world, then you can really see what corresponds to the reality, and therefore also to the truth. But truly this alone is not enough for you to be able to change yourselves effortlessly and spontaneously in your inner nature, in your individuality, and that is the actual problem, because it is also necessary for a complete change to take place in your inner nature. Many amongst you do not wish to change themselves in their inner nature, and a change of the inner nature is particularly unattractive to those amongst you who are well provided for and secure to a certain extent in economic and social respects, and therefore who only have minor problems, if indeed any at all. But there are also those amongst you who are captured by and dependent on your religion, and who hold fast to your religious, ideological, or philosophical imaginations, or who are ready simply to accept all things of the existence and your own self, and to live with them just as they happen to be, or happen to impinge upon you in any quite distinct or altered kind and wise whatsoever. However, all this is wrong, and it is a life attitude that does not correspond with the truth and reality, and indeed not with the guidelines of the creational laws and recommendations either, which are not difficult to recognize and to fulfill. Indeed, even if they do appear to be too heavy and too power-destroying for you to recognize and to fulfill, because you are too weak towards yourselves and, what is more, too cowardly to separate yourselves from the false of your individuality, which gives you so much apparent joy and apparent well-being if you live according to your Ausartungen, your vices and pathological cravings, your hatred, your unfreedom, disharmony, and the unpeace, as well as your pathological craving for revenge and all other terrible things. In all this doing and acting with regard to your Ausartungen, you human beings of earth are blocked off towards the truth, because of which you also do not search for the truth and also cannot fathom it out. Therefore, it is pointless and nonsensical for you to complain about all the Ausartungen of the society, which are fundamentally given in yourselves, and bring forth malicious effects, which lead to further misforming of your inner nature, as a result of which you sink in yourselves, and in the society ever more deeply, into a negation of the truth, and into new Ausartungen time and time again. Truly, many amongst you create illusions for themselves, and assume that they must undertake a fundamental developmental change in their inner nature, however, with the aspect that they need to be helped with bringing about the developmental change, and that they must be shown the way thereto. But truthfully, such a way cannot be shown, because each process in yourselves for the developmental change of your own inner nature, i.e., of the individuality and attitudes, etc., is purely individual or personal, and can only be fulfilled by those human beings amongst you who work on it themselves. And those of you who search for help in order to be shown a way in the form of a method or a system for the developmental change of your own inner nature, those are not really seriously working on an effective developmental change, because everything is merely directed towards having others do everything in order to bring about the apparently desired developmental change, whereas there is no fundamental interest in a developmental change of the inner nature, but only an interest in having others use a method or a system which is intended to lead to the apparently wished-for developmental change of your own individuality, with only minor help from yourselves. But truly, each way, each method, or each system for the developmental change of the inner nature is purely individual, i.e., personal, and cannot be transferred to another by you. Therefore, it would be exceedingly foolish to name a way, a method, or a system. If this, however, were to be done, then you would only be following an imitation, i.e., a pattern, and thereby taking over the purely individual way, i.e., the method or the system of another, and copying the entire thing into yourselves, through which you would unavoidably get yourselves into difficulties and hardships that are based in the thoughts, feelings, consciousness, and psyche, namely through an adapting to an external individuality, and through an approval of the same, which without doubt brings forth confusion in your own mental block, and leads to chaos in the psyche and consciousness. This means, if you do such a thing, that you set up the authority of one of your fellow human beings in yourselves, through which enormous conflicts are brought forth between yourselves and the external authority, as a result of which you believe that you are obliged to do this or that which is told and dictated to you, although you are incapable of actually doing it, because you cannot exchange your inner nature with that of one of your fellow human beings. But you must be yourselves, and free in yourselves in every wise. Therefore, two inner natures cannot be existent in you either. You human beings of Earth, you are individual natures who have your own thoughts and feelings, as well as your own, and therefore individual intentions and inclinations, hardships and needs, as well as wishes, which can in no kind and wise be integrated in an external method or an external system which you believe you must follow. In all respects, an external authority stands in opposition to your own person and dignity. Therefore, the recognition of an external authority in yourselves is a contradiction to your own inner freedom and cannot be tolerated under any circumstances. If you tolerate it nevertheless, then you are no longer yourselves, but rather you lead an existence of doubtfulness, and therefore a life between the external method, i.e., the external system, i.e., an external ideology, and the effective reality of your true life. If you allow to let yourselves in for an attempt in such a wise that brings your own inner nature into consonance with the external authority, i.e., the external ideology, then you demolish your own self-consciousness and suppress your entirely own individuality. The actual truth of yourself is not anchored in the external authority, i.e., ideology, but solely and alone in you yourselves, and indeed in that which you effectively are. Therefore, you shall consider that, if you fathom yourselves, you do not direct yourselves according to others, not according to an external authority, i.e., not according to an external ideology, but only according to yourselves, and according to what you truthfully are, and in all honesty want to be, and also strive to be. However, if you do not follow this guidance, then you will remain during the time of your life as human beings who live from the authority of others and are subserviently dependent on them in debasing submissiveness. If you wish to change yourselves, human beings of Earth, and if in doing so you demand that you shall be told how you shall do this, then it may very well appear upright that you really want to do it, but that does not correspond to the truth, because truthfully you are being unhonest and do not want it, since you are calling for an external authority, which is supposed to help you to achieve a new inner regulation of your inner nature. Therefore you are hoping to attain a new individuality through it, and through its method, i.e., its system. But this is truly not possible, because only you yourselves can change yourselves fundamentally through your own motivation, initiative, and power. Therefore, you must also go your own way. An external authority is never able to change your inner nature, your individuality, and create a new inner regulation in yourselves, but truly only yourselves. If, however, an external attempt is made, nevertheless, to impose a new regulation on your inner nature, i.e., your individuality, then an enormous chaos will inevitably arise in you, through which you are cast into dependency and confusion. This fact, you human beings of Earth, is something to which you must respond with intellect and rationality, and recognize it as effective truth, so that you may understand that for your consciousness and for your inner nature, no other authority than your own comes into consideration. If you read and follow a book or other scripts, if you listen to a teacher, to your friends, parents, brothers and sisters, acquaintances, to the other partner in your partnership, whether man or woman, or to an authority, or to the society, etc., then this is already an outward and external authority by which you will be captured and made dependent if you do not autonomously think through in yourselves what you have read and heard, and if you cannot in yourselves develop it into a valuable factor of the truth that is independent from the outside. But if you do not do this, then you will continue to live only according to a pattern and a pre-given formula, as you have done since time immemorial, through enslaving yourselves to an external authority and ideology. But if you really want to change yourselves in your consciousness and in your inner nature, and therefore also acquire a new and sound individuality for yourselves thereby, then you must ask yourselves how you can change to the good and better, and how you can create in yourselves a new authority that is your own, by means of which you then put an end for all time to any external as well as your own old authority, so that you are then only yourselves. In order to achieve this, however, you must change yourselves down to the roots of your inner nature and existence, as well as in your consciousness, which you must direct in its function into the right lines of right thoughts, out of which right and good feelings arise accordingly, through which you not only form your own psyche, but also influence your inner nature towards a new individuality in a good wise. And if you act in this wise, then you will no longer be dependent on any external tradition through which an enormous dependency, indolence, and subservience is imposed upon you, which has ruled you since time immemorial. Therefore, always consider that you can never expect any help whatsoever from outside with regard to your inner developmental change, but that you can in every wise only help yourselves. What can be given to you from the outside through external authorities is no more and no less than a direction or teaching of what you actually have to do, that you simply must change yourselves to the better. However, the way, the method, or the system is something that you must find in yourselves, because this is a purely individual and therefore personal concern, since truly each human being is an individuum of their own, which has their own individual ways, methods, and systems in order to deal with both themselves and with the world around. Therefore, there is no God, no tin God, no teacher, no dogma, no method and no system, no coercion, no cleric, no false or true prophet, and also no other human being or other external influence through which you could be shown an individual way to an inner developmental change in your inner nature and consciousness, because this individuality is only given in yourselves. If you only want, you can reject any external authority, and only accept your own, and therefore truly only be yourselves, through which it arises that you no longer let yourselves be enmeshed in ideologies, philosophies, and religions, and also that you no longer go in fear of gods, tin gods, or demons, nor any of your fellow human beings. Because, if you finally recognize your own value, then you will not let yourselves be led any longer either through subservience, i.e., through submissiveness, or treated as a second-class human being and even bullied, but rather you place yourselves in your value on the same level with your fellow human beings, without, however, raising yourselves up over them. And when you are finally yourselves, then it will happen that you repudiate everything false that you as human beings have dragged around with yourselves for many generations. And truly, when this happens, then an ever greater energy will grow in you, out of which more and more power will unfold, through which you will come to ever more, greater, and more extensive life capability, as well as to greater vital courage, which has inherent in itself very much more intensity, drive, and vitality that can be entirely lived out. Therefore, large reserves are always available which can no longer run out. And once you have achieved this, and brought it to ample effect in yourselves, then you have liberated yourselves from the heaviest burden of your life, and have cast off from yourselves everything connected with external authorities, as well as the heavy weight of your own world and unworthy authority, which is now replaced through a new, powerful, and energy-rich one.